my name is Sumitra Janalgeta. I built an application called GoldCat, and for building it, I used a bunch of different technologies. And one of the technologies I used is PayPal Adaptive Payments. How many have you heard of PayPal Adaptive Payment APIs? Nobody? PayPal, nope. You all have heard, right? Yeah. So has anybody used PayPal in their applications before? In the applications, not just to pay. So you have heard of PayPal then?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief overview of what PayPal Adaptive Payments is, and I'm going to show you some code implementation using Java servlets in Java, how to call API calls, and then maybe I'll show you some, if there's enough time, use cases from my application, how I integrated it. So what is PayPal Adaptive Payments? It's basically enables developers to embed payments into an application, right? So any payment, there are three entities. One is the sender of the money, the receiver of the payment, and then the application which is making the API calls, right? So this API call basically gives a lot of flexibility that wasn't available before. Before it was you just send some money or take some subscription, and you can't manipulate much beyond that. So the adaptive API basically made it much more flexible for the developers to do many more things with their applications. So one fundamental basic scenario is you have a sender, right? And then the application itself is the receiver. So these scenarios is where basically subscription. So you want to subscribe to your site. So you go and you give your credentials, and then you're paying to the application itself. So the the receiving end is the application. So your application is calling the PayPal API. That's one scenario. And this scenario, which is the new scenario, is there is a sender who is sending the money, and your application is only basically sending money to a group of people. It's called parallel pay. So you're sending, the application is just making a, say, PayPal call, and from 2 to 6 maximum people you can pay, you can split, basically it's called split payment or parallel payment. You can pay from one sender to 6 people simultaneously. So earlier it was not available. So this is called parallel pay, right? And so the next one is called chained pay. So chained pay is, okay, sender is sending some money, and then your application can take part of that money. Let's say you want to charge a transaction fee. And then, but there are people who are actually selling the goods, and then you want to distribute that money to the real vendors, right? So the application takes a part of it. So that becomes a primary receiver, and then application distributes the rest of the money to the other vendors, right? So this scenario is basically maybe you're buying an airline ticket, and then a hotel ticket, and then in like 3 or 4 vendors, and then I'm enabling as a travel agent to be able to buy that, and then maybe I take 10% of that. So it's kind of that, right? So this is called chain. Chain means I come in the middle and I become the primary receiver, and then I distribute rest of it to the others. And so the other is basically the application itself is the sender. So let's say you want to, as an application, you want to give commission to your employees, right? So nobody is paying, but the application itself is paying. So this is another scenario. So these kind of flexibilities of the different scenarios were not available with PayPal before. Now they have made all these available, so you actually can manipulate all this within your applications. So now you know what is adaptive. And by the way, I think Facebook, I think from 2011, this year, they have partnered with PayPal, so do all the credits and all that is through this PayPal Adaptive Payment. So the different operations this API enables is basically pay, which I covered. What I covered is different types of payments, right? Simple pay, parallel pay, split pay, so that's a pay operation. And then payment details. So once you have payment is already made, you can save all those details. Before it was not possible. And based on that, maybe you can do coupons. Or based on that, maybe you can do loyalty points, right? So once you can start tracking those details, so you can, so payment details. And then pre-approval. Pre-approval is essentially the sender is giving for the application approval so that the application can make payment to others on behalf of the sender, right? So like maybe monthly, every month 10, I'm giving you approval to you so you can pay it. So that each time the sender need not have to give the application approval. And then automatically it is pre-approved, so automatically the application will make the payments, right? So that's called pre-approval. And then you can get pre-approval details. And then if you already set up a pre-approval, you can cancel the pre-approval. And then refunds. Within an application earlier, you could not process refunds, right? So now through the API itself can take the money from the receiver's end and then puts back into the payer's end. So through the application, you can do that. And then currency converters. So these are the different operations that are possible through this Adaptive Payments API. And this API, actually they have multiple SDKs. I think they have one for with PHP, one for Java, and then .NET. And I think even for Ruby on Rails they have. So, but I used Java for mine. So I'll just go over some code in that. So before I go, if you have any questions in that, you can ask me before I go into the code. No questions? So first thing to be able to use this API, what we have to do is we have to have an account with the sandbox, PayPal sandbox. So that is developer.paypal.com. So once we open an account, we create test accounts, right? So and then we get API credentials. So you get a username, password, signature, and then we use these in our application. So how many here, like if I go through Java, it makes sense to them? You can follow, right? Okay, servlets. Okay. So what I do, those credentials, what I do is in my web.xml, for that particular servlet, I put in as parameters, right? So these are the names that we have to use, like the user PayPal Adaptive API username. So you take it from the sandbox.
Question?
Yeah.
If I were to write down the value for that signature, what could I do with it?
Sorry?
If I were to write down the API password and signature that you got up there, what could I do with it?
What's the question? Like if you want to write down?
Well, I mean, I see, are those your credentials that you need to like charge people money?
Oh no, this is sandbox. So I'm showing you the sandbox.
I see.
Okay, so that's the first step.
I think you're trying to get some of your money.
Yeah, so I'm running you, so before you get there, first you need to have a sandbox.
All right.
So sandbox, and then later on you have to get, I'm going to go where, yeah.
You'll have a bunch of imaginary money.
So that's like few steps away.
Okay.
So you create, so basically you create these parameters, right? They have to be the same name, these exact same names, and you fill these values from your sandbox values that are given here from your API credentials. And then in your servlet, so I'll show you. So let's say you're making a simple pay. So let's say in my site, I want to take subscription, right? Or somebody has to pay me, but the receiver is me. So in the servlet, in the initialization, we read all those parameters, and then we set this credential object with all those values, right? A username, password, signature, and then the account email. So this account email is where the money will go to. So, and then the other parameters in terms of what are the ones the order is made, where should the application come back to? So that is basically the return URL. We will set a return URL. And then if you want, if the user decides to cancel, where should he come back? And then we set a cancel URL. And then here is where we set for this simple, this is the simple pay. We are trying to do a simple pay. So for this object, we set the credential object, which all the API credentials are there. And then we have to set a user IP, and then application name and the currency. And then here is basically, I'm showing you a demo sandbox one. So here it's set to sandbox. If it's in production, then you set it to production. But before you get there, they actually have to give you approve your app.